I played the worst Pokemon games ever made, according to Metacritic. But what I really want to know is, are these games really that bad, or are they misunderstood hidden gems? I'm going to play through them all and find out. Now, before I get into the 5 games for this video proper, I need to make a quick disclaimer. There were 2 games that would have qualified with bottom 5 scores, but unfortunately neither are available anymore as they were digital only and pulled offline. The first would have been the lowest score on this whole video with Pokémon Rumble Rush, with a Metacritic score of 42, released in 2019 for iOS and Android, and was shut down only 1 year later. Pokemon Rumble Rush tried to bring the Rumble formula to mobile, but ended up feeling like an unfinished bare-bones prototype. The gameplay loop boiled down to mindless tapping and endless grinding, with auto battle features doing most of the work for you. Combined with aggressive monetization and almost no variety, reviewers called it one of the laziest Pokemon releases to date. Staying in the Rumble games, Pokemon Rumble U would have been the next one with a Metacritic score of 49, releasing August 15th, 2013 for the Wii U. Released exclusively on the Wii U eShop, Pokemon Rumble U was criticized for being little more than a repetitive button masher with no real depth or exploration. Many features and upgrades were locked behind real-world NFC figures, turning what could have been a fun spin-off into a clunky microtransaction experiment. Critics called it one of the most shallow Pokemon titles ever, and now with the eShop gone, it's basically lost media. There was an extremely limited physical release in Europe, but I tried searching for it everywhere and I couldn't find anyone selling this thing. So with those out of the way, let's move on to our first game, Pokémon Shuffle. This game had a Metacritic score of 56 and was released August 31st, 2015 for iOS and Android. It's basically a free-to-play match 3 game, probably exactly what you think it is. But for science, let's take a look. So yeah, it's exactly what we all thought it was. You line up Pokemon faces in rows to deal damage to Pokemon you're fighting. Basically, it's Puzzle and Dragons with Pokemon, if anyone remembers that game. And after you defeat a Pokemon, you get a chance to catch them. Now, your percentage chance goes up the fewer turns you take to win the battle, and if you catch them, they're obviously on your team and you can use them in subsequent battles. The Pokemon in your party also level up and grow stronger the more battles you fight with them. I gotta say though, I feel like this percentage is total nonsense. I had a miss on a 97% chance and several high 80s, but then somehow caught other ones in low 50s and 60s. The catch is, if you miss, you can spend currency for a Great Ball and you basically guarantee yourself a catch. I feel like they're fudging the numbers behind the scenes to get you to spend extra money, but I can't prove it yet. Eventually, there's different challenges like blocks you have to break that get in your way, or Pokemon will change different shapes on the fly. You can also evolve Pokemon mid-fight if you use them enough. This is actually a pretty cool mechanic and lets you destroy huge blocks of pieces. And like with all these kinds of games, there's ways they try to get you to spend money, whether it's jewels to get more hearts, to get more tries, or coins so you can get more turns in battles. They also do a frustratingly good job at making you feel good whenever you win a battle with lots of cheery music, sound effects, and visual effects. I do like that the game has a message when you start the game that you don't need to spend money, and it even asks your age, so they're at least trying to be as thoughtful as they can with their monetization. But yeah, not much else to really say. Fun little time killer, but not horribly offensive. But keep watching because we're definitely gonna get there. Next up, we have Pokémon Channel, which has a Metacritic score of 55 and was released December 1st, 2003 for the GameCube. It was a sort of spiritual successor to the N64 game Hey You Pikachu. Anyone remember that game? I remember that being a fun little weekend rental with that much depth. I'm curious to see what this one is and if it's any different. So when you boot up the game, Professor Oak appears on your TV and asks you to register your name, and then asks you to watch an anime called Pichu Bros. Now, I'm sitting here watching this, and it's literally a 7-minute straight clip from the anime. There's no interaction, there's no nothing. It just kept on going. I'm like, what is this? Is this even a game? Now, eventually, after the episode's over, you kind of pull yourself away from the TV and you let Pikachu in, and then it kind of gives you more tutorials on how to control the TV and do what you're supposed to do. Next, I'm watching a Pokemon quiz show, but I'm not even answering questions. I'm just literally watching Pokemon answer questions. Like, what is this? What is the point? Look how dumb this one Pokemon is. It's asking what the Pokemon behind the curtain is, and it's literally shouting its name, and they get it wrong. Now, it would be kind of funny if they did a fake out like they used to do with the anime, like, what's that Pokemon? And maybe it was a funny little shape, but clearly they're just trying to make this easy for kids. Now, eventually I did get a chance to try, and like, unless you're deaf, how could you possibly lose? And then there's a news channel with Meowth as a reporter and a Psyduck as a news anchor. This is just so bizarre. Now, after a little while, I noticed Pikachu started making noise and eventually wanted to open this box under the bed. So we go over there, open the box, and we find this sort of like Snorlax Tamagotchi game where you feed it food. There's basically no skill to it. You just kind of tap it as fast as you can and you get a high score. WTF indeed. Now, I went back to watching TV and there were things like a Squirtle shopping channel. I actually had a little money that Professor Oak gave me, so I bought a binder that came with some Pokemon cards. And literally not 10 seconds later is it delivered to my house. That's some insane service. Can you imagine if Amazon had Pokemon delivering packages instead of whatever's going on here? And you can open up the pack and look at the cards, and even some of the cards are sort of like reflective or they move, which is kind of neat, I guess. Now, to progress, you have to watch specific shows recommended by Professor Oak, and he's asking you to do this in the vein of trying to learn Pikachu's behaviors based on what he would do if he watched TV. And he even knows if you haven't watched the shows, because I tried. What a weirdo. Like, is my character imprisoned here, forced to watch dumb, fake Pokemon shows for all of eternity? Now, when you watch all the shows, he asks for a report and then gives you a reward. The first thing I got was this Smeargle doll, and there's a painting minigame that's somehow even more rudimentary than the actual paint program on your computer. You can kind of paint bucket different parts of the drawing, but there's supposedly a crayon mechanic and an eraser mechanic, but for me, it just barely worked. What a mess indeed. Now, eventually Pikachu breaks the TV and I'm able to escape my prison. I mean, go outside. Here, there's other Pokemon in your garden that you can interact with, and they'll give you cards if you answer some trivia questions. You can do some gardening. And I gotta say, I'm tipping my cap to the game because it encourages you to eventually turn the TV off, go outside, and eat fruit. It could be worse. I mean, Pikachu could be a slob, seeing a pizza commercial and asking me for a delivery. This is a game that was clearly made for small children and almost feels like a cult indoctrination instead of a game. Hey kids, don't forget to watch your Pokemon show, play the games, and buy the cards. It feels like an interactive advertisement instead of a game. Like, for instance, what is this show? I'm watching Pokemon do a fitness routine? I guess if you had small children that loved Pokemon, this could potentially keep them distracted for a little bit, but honestly, I just find it more offensive than entertaining. It barely qualifies as a video game. A curiosity for sure, but a complete waste of time for anyone outside of the most extreme hardcore Pokemon fans. All right, next up we have Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky. Not Explorers of the Sky, just Explorers of Sky. That sounds like improper English. Anyway, it has a Metacritic score of 54 and was released October 12th, 2009 for the DS. Now, apparently it had low ratings because it didn't add much compared to previous versions. I guess this is a third version of the game and there were two others before it, so it felt like a cash grab. Well, I didn't play either of those games, so I'm just judging this in a bit of a vacuum, and I actually like mystery dungeon games in general, so I'm curious to check this one out. So the game starts by asking me different questions, and they seem harmless, like some basic ones, but then it asks me what I would do if someone farted. What does this have to do with Pokemon? And why does this feel like a Myers-Briggs personality test? Like, why are they analyzing my personality? Ah, okay, I get it. So based on your answers, it picks a Pokemon for you, and for me, it picked Trico, I guess, and then after, I could pick a partner Pokemon. And for me, I gotta go with my man Squirtle because Squirtle is my favorite Pokemon. And whoa, Pokemon can actually talk? Wild. Now, apparently my character was a human that was turned into a Pokemon. Interesting. I'm curious to see where this goes. Now, I have to say the pixel art here is pretty incredible. The DS was a system that I totally missed, but I love this era's visual style, whether it be the low polygon look or pixel art. It just looks incredible. Now, when the story kicks off, there's a Coughing and a Zubat that stole my buddy Squirtle's little treasure, and we have to go get it back. And so this is a mystery dungeon game, but just with a Pokemon coat of paint. So if you don't know what a mystery dungeon is, basically you go exploring a dungeon trying to get to the next floor, and enemies only act when you do. So for example, when you move, then they move. If you attack, then they can move or attack, etc. Now, I do have just sort of a normal attack and a set ability, and you can only have one set ability at a time, but as the game goes on, you can learn more and level up. It's a simple but addicting game loop, especially with the Pokemon theme to it. I think it's really cool. Now, eventually I get to the bottom, there's a boss battle. It's pretty straightforward, not a lot of strategy. Got my treasure back from Coughing and Zubat, and then we're off to form an exploration team. But the only problem is I need to join the Wigglytuff's guild along with other Pokemon explorers. And after doing so, I get some new gear. Now I can finally hold more items instead of just one as I explore, and we get beds that we can rest in at the end of the day, which are piles of hay. On paper it sounds weird, but they are animals after all, so I guess that kind of makes sense. So now we get our first assignment, and it's to get back Spoink's stolen pearl. It's basically more of the same, fighting enemies, leveling up, getting items, and I keep going until I get down to the designated floor. Now, having a bigger bag means more items. Now I can pick up ranged items that I can throw. There's more healing items that I can use. Much more convenient overall. Right now it's relatively easy, but this scratches a very particular itch for me that I love. Completely exploring every room before moving on to the next one really satisfies my OCD. Plus, leveling up all the way feels good, and combat isn't too hard yet. It's very zen-like and chill. Plus, it's fun to have Pokemon as enemies instead of just random monsters. So I get through that and move on to the third dungeon, and this is really where I needed to start using my wits. There's much more enemies and they hit a lot harder. So I had to be really clever with my positioning and using my items. I had to make sure me and Squirrel were next to each other so we could both attack at the same time, use my throwing items, use my healing items, and there's also a hunger mechanic to keep track of. So you have to have food that you pick up and eat it and make sure your Pokemon don't get too hungry. Now this all could sound kind of annoying, and I could totally see why people wouldn't like this kind of game, but I don't know, there's just something about it that I enjoy. All right, after this dungeon, I can start taking jobs off the jobs board and go back to old dungeons and kind of just do what I want. Here I'm rescuing lost Pokemon. After doing so, I can get rewards and eventually move on to the next chapter. I will say the only thing about this game that I really don't like is sort of the daily routine that the game makes you go through. Once you come back from a dungeon, you have to sit through this long eating animation, then you go to sleep, and then you wake up and line up, and then you can finally go back and go exploring more. I just want to get back to playing the game. I get theming wise, this kind of makes sense, but for me, it just felt a little bit annoying. Overall, I had a lot of fun with this game. It has great pixel art, addicting gameplay, it's pretty relaxing, and adds an extra touch of being Pokemon themed. I totally get why people wouldn't like this kind of game. It's for a very specific kind of player, and I guess I just happen to be that player. I think Cheat Code Central's review perfectly sums up my thoughts. While Explorers of Sky would be a decent game if it were judged in a vacuum, when viewed alongside Explorers of Time and Darkness, there simply isn't enough unique, quality content to make it relevant. Oddly enough, I am exploring it in a vacuum, and I didn't play those two previous games, so I dig it. But buckle up, because that's pretty much the last time I'm gonna have anything positive to say for the rest of this video. All right, next up we have Pokemon Battle Revolution, which has a Metacritic score of 53 and was released June 25th, 2007 for the Wii. It's basically Pokemon Stadium from Nintendo 64, but evolved. It's got better graphics and all the newer Pokemon and probably a few other little accoutrements. I remember playing Pokemon Stadium and thinking it was cool that it was Pokemon with better visuals, but disappointed that it was just the battles. But anyway, let's check it out. Well, it seems like not much has changed since the year 2000. Basically, it's the same game, albeit with a few wrinkles. Just battling through different Coliseums, no exploring, and you can't even pick your team unless you have a DS, which I'll get to in a second. There is local and online multiplayer, but I didn't have anybody to play with locally, and ain't no one playing Pokemon Battle Revolution online in 2025. Now, the game does let you pick from 2 rental passes, basically 2 different teams of 6 Pokemon. You could make your own custom pass, but again, it requires you to have a DS and transfer your Pokemon from a DS game. Probably a cool gimmick at the time, but considering I don't have any of the DS Pokemon games, in hindsight, it really makes this game feel less valuable, and I feel like I kind of got ripped off in some ways. Now, I chose a team with the evolutions of the OG starters from Red and Blue, plus Dragonair is pretty cool as well. So I pick my stadium and start a sort of tournament. Basically, you have to keep on winning, and eventually, if you keep going, you'll fight the Coliseum leader. Now, I'm not really sure what there is to say here. It's Pokemon battling. You pick your move, you attack, the other guy picks their moves and they attack. However, one interesting wrinkle is that you have a team of 6 Pokemon, but so does your opponent, but you can only bring in 3 each. So you have to kind of be strategic and look at their team and go, okay, what could the potential weaknesses be? What could you potentially have to bring in? So you have to really think about which guys you want to bring in. And the other thing I have to say is that status effects in this game are OP as heck. In the first few battles, I kept getting stunned and slowed and put to sleep, and it was super annoying, but then I decided to turn the tables. Dragonair has paralyzed, and after I started using that move, I basically could never lose. It was ridiculous. The only problem is that the battles are so slow because of the long animations, which for 2007 looked pretty nice, especially like the water and the fire effects, but it doesn't make the game any less boring. Finally, I get to the Coliseum leader and get this. Her name is Taylor. I thought maybe it was just whatever name you input at the beginning and they were maybe trying to do something meta, but nope, that's just her name. So I won and got some money. Now you can spend your winnings at the shop to customize your character, but there's only one problem. You can't see what the items look like. Kind of an important detail when you want to buy customization options for your character. I guess I just have to trust that Cool Hat is actually a cool hat. And that's it. That's literally all there is to the game. There's 7 Coliseums in total and it takes about 12 hours to finish. I feel like the Stadium and Coliseum games were a cool gimmick before Pokemon jumped to 3D, but after that it just feels so basic. For me, a huge part of the Pokemon games is the adventure of exploring these big worlds, running around, talking to people, finding secrets. But without that, the games just feel hollow. Maybe some of the others are more fully featured, but this one is about as bare bones as it gets. Last and most likely least, we have Pokémon Dash with a Metacritic score of 46 and was released March 14th, 2005 for the DS. It's a racing game in which you use a stylus to direct Pikachu. IGN's review mentions that you can only control Pikachu and it can be completed in only a matter of hours. Well, I'm not exactly excited about this one, but let's take a look nonetheless. To begin, the game runs you through a few tutorial stages to get you used to the controls. You want to try and stay on the road, as that's when Pikachu is the fastest. If you go in the grass or forest, Pikachu slows down, and if you go in stuff like swamps in the water, Pikachu could even drown. Alright, with the tutorial out of the way, let's try our first cup, the green cup. Now, the first few races aren't that bad. They're pretty easy and straightforward. But then there's these parts where you have to use hot air balloons. Oh my god, are they so annoying. Not only do you have to try to find the next checkpoint using the map, which is really hard to navigate, you have to swipe to go up just to elevate, then you have to aim where Pikachu's gonna land, and you have to swipe to dive. And you can pop balloons to drop Pikachu faster, but it's kind of a crapshoot if Pikachu is just gonna fall and splat to his doom. Like literally, it doesn't matter if you're as high as you can go or like 5 feet from the ground. Now I ended up winning the first cup, not bad I guess. But then we move on to the white cup, and oh my god, I literally had to turn the game off after this because I could physically feel my heart rate and blood pressure going up as I was getting so angry with the game. When it's simple pathing, it's not that bad, but when you are constantly hopping terrain, it becomes the most frustrating game I've ever played. The controls are so bad. I cannot think of a worse way to control a racing game than to be constantly swiping with a stylus. Tapping, okay, maybe, but the swiping doesn't always work, so sometimes Pikachu will go the wrong way and then you'll end up in a slow area and you have to tap super fast to get back onto the road and you're like dropping 3-4 places in the race. Or sometimes I'm accidentally popping a balloon or going in the water where I'm not supposed to and end up drowning. The other problem is that the screen size that you're actually working with is pretty small, so it's kind of hard to see where you're going. I get that there's a map on top, but still it doesn't help at all how limited the camera is when you're running around. And unless you've played this game before, you cannot possibly know how annoying it is to try and control this game. I'd probably have an aneurysm if I played this any longer, and I can't even imagine how much more annoying and frustrating this game gets. Definitely worthy of being the lowest on the list. So here's how Metacritic ranked these games, but if I were to re-rank them, they'd look like this. Pokemon Dash is easily the worst of the bunch with some of the worst controls ever, and Pokémon Channel is right behind it. I almost put it at the bottom because it barely qualifies as a game. Now, I actually enjoyed Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky quite a bit. I totally get why fans and critics wouldn't like it, but if you're into games like Etrian Odyssey, you might want to give that one a go. Now, these were the worst Pokemon games of all time, but if you want to see the worst Final Fantasy games ever made, watch this video next.